This book, Nils, The Wonderful Adventures of Nils, has this lovely map at the front of the book that shows us where Nils has gone so far with the geese. So he started off down here at this little place in this part of the country that's called Ch9, and that's his little house. And so far, he's flown all the way through here. They took a long time getting through here. They finally got to this little island, this kind of long island called Åland. That's where they found the goose that was injured, that goose Delphin. So that was pretty far into the book already. So we spent a lot of time getting just across this little tip, coming around here. And then we had Gotland. That was where all those sheep lived, and they attacked the fox with the sheep. Then let's see, they came up here, Smallland. This is where he was flying past and all the people were looking up at him. So let's see if we can remember. And that kind of just happened. So that was this page. And that was just right in here. So it was probably, and I think that there were little islands in here that they were landing on where they found those old ruins, and he kind of went to old castles and things like that. And then, let's see, I don't see, oh, Dalarna. Okay, so they've also now, they've kind of gone through a bunch of this stuff because they got all the way up to Dalarna here. That was where the iron workings were, way up here. And so he's traveled a really long way in kind of a short part of the book. And in this part of the book took us a long time, and he just went a short way. And here we took a long time in the book, or a short time in the book to go all around here. And I think that's kind of where they are right now, is right up in here. So we'll come back and look at this map again as we continue journeying. You can see this is the country of Sweden here next to Norway and Finland. And here's Denmark over here. So this is all kind of above Europe. This is part of Europe, but it's kind of in the north. All right. Chapter 9. For several days, the weather was terrible, the wind howling and the rain slashing down. Both people and animals knew this was inevitable for spring to arrive, but all the same they found it almost unbearable. The snow was now melting fast, water dripping and rustling and rippling everywhere. The spring streams started in many places flooded where threatening dwellings of both animals and people. The wild geese struggled against the west wind as best they could, but nonetheless they were thrown off course, and before the wind dropped and the sun peeped out, they had been driven back to the shores of Lake Marley. The boy noticed the water in the lake was rising, for every minute the level of the trunks of the willows and elders along the shore already high, and the lovely shore walk had become a rushing stream. In Kopling, people were rowing boats along the streets, and he saw 2 elk swimming ashore from a small skerry. In Halstaviken, the swans' nests had been torn from their moorings and were drifting away in the strong wind. Some had already fallen apart, and he could see eggs glinting on the lake bed. Hundreds of wild swans, white and shimmering, were swimming round in the bay. The wild geese had found a place to sleep a little further out in Ekosland, but Nils was far too hungry to be able to sleep. I must try to get into some cottage or other to find some food, he thought. As so many things were floating round in the water, it wasn't difficult to find a craft which would do for someone like Nils. He jumped onto a piece of planking, fished out a little stick, and pulled his way toward the shore. He had scarcely landed when he heard a splashing in the water. A female swan was sleeping on her nest only a few meters away. He kept quite still and suddenly found a 4-legged scoundrel had already taken a few steps out into the water and was about to creep up on the swan's nest. "Hey! Hey!" yelled the boy at the top of his voice, slapping the water with his stick. The swan rose, but had he wanted to, the fox could easily have caught her. Instead, the fox headed straight for the boy, who ran off inland, where there were large fields but not a tree in sight to climb up, nor a hole to hide in. It was true he was a good runner, but it was also obvious he couldn't compete with a fox that was free and had nothing to carry. There were lights on in the windows of some cottages a little way away from the shore, so he ran toward them. A dog was barking, and by the nearest cottage a large, handsome guard dog was standing outside his kennel. "Listen, guard dog, would you help me catch a fox tonight?" the boy said quietly. The guard dog couldn't see very well, and he was also angry about being chained up. "Making a fool of me, are you?" he barked. "You just come within reach, and I'll teach you a thing or two. No one plays the fool with me." "I'm not frightened," said the boy, running up to the dog, who was surprised, and he fell quiet. "I'm Tom Thumb, and I'm traveling round with the wild geese. Maybe you've heard about me." "Yes, the sparrows have indeed twittered a little," the dog replied. "They say you've done great things, although you're so small." "Well, things have been more or less all right so far," said the boy. "But they won't be all that good for me if you don't help me. I have a fox at my heels. He's hiding round the corner there." "Yes, I can smell him all right, but we'll soon get rid of him," said the dog, barking as loudly as he could. "You'll need more than a fine bark to frighten that fox," said the boy. "I know how we can catch him, you and I." The boy and the guard dog crept into the kennel and lay there whispering to each other. After a while, they saw the fox sticking its nose round the corner of the cottage, then sitting down at a distance, speculating on how he could lure Nils Gooseboy out. The guard dog, in his turn, stuck his head out and growled, "Go away, or I'll get you." "I'll sit here as long as I want to," replied the fox. "Go away," snarled the dog threateningly. "Otherwise you've gone hunting for the very last time." "I know how long your chain is," scoffed the fox, not budging an inch. "Then you've only yourself to blame," said the dog, and he took a great leap at the fox and caught him without any difficulty, for the boy had undone his collar and let him loose. The battle was soon over, the dog the victor, and the fox lying on the ground, not daring to move. "Yes, you just keep still," said the dog, "otherwise I'll bite you to death." He took the fox by the scruff of the neck and dragged him over to the kennel. The boy brought out the chain, wound the collar twice round the fox's neck, then fastened it. "Well, I hope you'll make a good guard dog, Smeary Fox," said the boy when he had finished. Chapter 10. The weather had suddenly turned fine, warm, calm, and pleasant. Nils Holgersson was lying on a clump of marsh marigolds, enjoying the sun, when a raven had come down and settled among the bright flowers. It was Bhakti. The boy had dealings with him before and knew that he couldn't always be relied on. Bhakti was looking dismal and solemn, but nonetheless the boy thought he could see a mischievous glint in his eye. The raven had surely come to make a fool of him, so Nils decided to take no notice of what he said. "It was clever of you to catch Smeary the fox," said the raven, "so I'll tell you a secret. You see, I can tell you what to do to become human again." Bhakti probably thought Nils would at once snap at the bait, but the boy simply said he already knew. As long as he got the white gander safely back home to Skane, then... "But if it goes wrong, perhaps you'll need another way out," said Bhakti. "Though I don't have to tell you." "Tell me your secret, then." "I'll tell you when the right moment comes. Get on my back and come with me, and we'll see what happens." The boy hesitated, because he never quite knew where he was with the raven. "Oh, so you don't dare," croaked Bhakti. Nils couldn't bear those words, so a moment later he was up on the raven's back. They set off, and in next to no time were in Uppsala, and Bhakti came down on a roof. "Look around and tell me who you think rules in this town," he said. "It might be the king," said Nils, who had seen a handsome castle with 2 mighty towers. "Not a bad guess," replied the raven, "but that was in the old days. The cathedral and all its tall spires had handsome portals and all its tall spires and handsome portals were gleaming in the evening sun. Perhaps the bishop and his priests, the boy suggested. Not bad either, because the archbishop lives here, but he's not the one who rules here either. Then I don't know, said the boy. Well, Academe rules in this town, Bakhti informed him. All those grand buildings you see, they have been put up for him and his people. Come and I'll show you. The raven took the boy to the university and the library, floating past the windows of research rooms and institutes of all kinds. Everywhere they went, people were reading and studying. If I weren't a raven, but just a human like you, then I'd settle here and learn everything that is in those books, said the raven. Wouldn't you like to do that too? Oh, no, said Nils. I'd rather go around with the wild geese. Don't you want to be someone who cures illnesses, or knows everything about the sun and moon, or speaks all languages? Well, that might be quite fun. Or someone who knows the difference between right and wrong, good and evil. Then you could preach in a church back home. A glimmer came into the boy's eyes. Father and mother would be pleased if I got that far, he said. A great crowd of young people wearing white caps had assembled in the botanical gardens and were singing spring songs, making speeches and cheering. Their cheerfulness was such that the boy suddenly felt how deplorable his own life was, so much so that he almost lost his desire to return to his traveling companions. Then the raven started croaking again. I'll tell you that secret now, Tom Thumb, he said. You must wait until you meet someone who tells you he would like to be in your shoes and travel round with the wild geese. Then you must say this. Bakhti whispered a few words in his ears, words that were so powerful and dangerous they couldn't be said out loud if you seriously wished to use them. Well, I don't suppose that will ever come about, said the boy. Help me instead to find a little food. I'm so terribly hungry. The raven took a turn across the town and put Nils down on the roof outside an attic room. Inside, the lamp was on, although the student who lived in the room was asleep in bed. The window was slightly open, and a half-eaten sandwich was lying on the table. The boy was soon feasting on it, smacking his lips at every mouthful. Hello there, and who might you be? Said a voice. Nils jumped, but the student was sitting up in bed, and he looked kind. My name's Nils Holgersson, and I'm a human, though I've been turned into a gnome, and now I'm traveling round with the wild geese, he replied brightly. How very strange, said the student. Then he asked Nils about everything that had happened, and in the end he said, Oh, if only I were in your shoes and could leave behind all my troubles. Bakhti tapped on the window with his beak, and the boy's head whirled, his heart thumping. They sounded almost like the right words. Surely you don't want to change with me. Surely a student doesn't want to be anything else. Oh, you should know what happened to me today, sighed the student. Then he told Nils that very morning a timid and poor friend had come to see him, bearing with him a thick bundle, a manuscript he had been working on for 5 years, and now he wanted to hear the student's honest opinion of it. The student had been just about to leave for his final exam, but nevertheless sat down and started reading, at once, page after page. When this book is published, his happiness will be complete, he said to himself. It will be fun to tell him that. But at that moment he looked at the time, and seeing that he was late, he hurried through the door. In the draft, the window blew open, and all the papers on the table swirled out over the rooftops. In despair, the student rushed back in and tried to rescue some of the pages, but he simply had to hurry off to his exam. It will affect my whole future, he thought, and dashed away. But he was so upset. Everything he had learned also seemed to have been blown away, and he failed to do very well. When he got back to his room, he looked out on the roof to see if there were any pages left, but not a single one was left. How would he be able to tell his friend the book was a masterpiece, but the manuscript was lost? No one would believe him. I can't bear the thought of making a friend so unhappy, groaned the student. It'd be much better for me if I were in your shoes and could go off with the wild geese. Again, Bhakti tapped hard on the window, but the boy sat there in silence for a long time. "Wait a moment," he said in a low voice, and then slowly stepped out on the windowsill. And at that moment the sun rose and shone and glistened on all the temples and towers of the town of learning. "What do you think you're doing?" said the raven. "Now you've lost your chance of being human." "I'm not going to change," said Nils. "I would only have all those miseries over the lost papers." "I can probably get them back," said Bhakti. "I'm sure you can, but I first want to see you do it," said Nils. The raven flew off and came back with 2 pages. For a whole hour he flew back and forth with more and more pages in his beak. "I think they're all here now," he gasped, but then he saw the student already putting the papers in order. "You're the silliest donkey I've ever come across," the raven shrieked at Nils. "Have you given him the book? Now he'll never say he wished he was in your shoes." The boy was also looking at the happy student. "Thank you, Bhakti," he said. "I realize you were testing me out. I suppose you thought I would let Martin look after himself on this dangerous journey as soon as things turned out well for me. But when this student told me his story, I thought about how horrible it was to betray a friend, so I didn't want to do that either." Bhakti scratched the back of his head and looked embarrassed, then flew straight over the cathedral back to the geese.